back to the ICAC focus now. Anthony Whealy QC joins me, a former Assistant Commissioner at ICAC and Judge at the New South Wales Court of Appeal. Anthony Whealy, thanks for your time. What did you make of day one of those ICAC hearings into Gladys Berejiklian?
Well, Kieran, it was what I expected. It opened slowly. It will be a slow process. It's a reconstruction day by day, week by week of a period of time from 2016 onwards. So we can't expect it to go very quickly. But what I thought was important was that Scott Robinson, counsel assisting, laid out what ICAC's been doing over the last 6 or 7 months, interviewing people, getting hold of documents, holding compulsory hearings. And it was interesting, as I suspected, that there's already been a compulsory private hearing with Gladys Berejiklian. So it throws into slightly different light, I think, her sudden decision to resign. It wasn't as if she didn't know all this was going on, some little time before that decision was made. And importantly, I think that counsel assisting also laid out what he expects the evidence to demonstrate. And I think that's, important for viewers to notice. When we hear the evidence, maybe it won't come up as he expects it to be. Alternatively, there's going to be cross-examination of witnesses. So things will change from day to day as we go on. I'd be very careful to rush to judgment here. We've heard a fair bit about Michael Toohey and his involvement, but he's yet to be cross-examined and he's yet to finalise his evidence. So I think don't rush to judgment. Let's watch it. The process seems to me to be very fair so far, and that's what it should be.
Indeed, it should be. As someone who's worked within the process, can you give our viewers a sense of how ICAC puts together, say, the rundown, in terms of the order of those that appear?
Well, I think it's common in these sort of things to leave the person whose conduct's being examined, in this case the former Premier, to leave her evidence until last. And that because that lets her see what everyone else has to say, and it gives her very experienced legal counsel the opportunity to cut down some of the things other people might be saying as they give their evidence, so that by the time we reach her at the end, she'll know very clearly what the evidence is she has to meet. As far as the way in which the evidence is organised, I think you'll see, even from today, that it's probably being organised chronologically as far as it can be. So we'll have witnesses talking about what happened in 2016 and early 2017. So I think that they always try to set it out as chronologically or logically as possible. Sometimes it's not always possible, but that's what I see happening here.
And when we look at the events of today, as we said, that private evidence that was given, a snippet played, what do you make of some of the reaction to what we've seen, both to the Premier's resignation, the criticism of ICAC from some quarters, but now we're really at the start of this process. Give us your reflections as someone who has worked in it, the reactions to what we've seen out of ICAC and the flow-on effects to the Premier, because you look at that snippet played in the opening, to me, it says quite a lot. I guess, as you say, you don't want to rush to judgment, but there's been no shortage of criticism levelled at ICAC and the way that it operates.
That's very true, but it's very ironic, isn't it, that a lot of the criticism that's levelled against New South Wales ICAC can be contrasted with the applause that's being given to the Victorian IBAC by some sections of the media. And they seem to be saying, oh, isn't it wonderful what's happening in Victoria, and isn't it terrible what's happening in New South Wales? But, leaving aside terminology differences, it's exactly the same model. Therefore I find it quite perplexing that people have been attacking New South Wales. The community can see what's been happening today in ICAC, and they'll continue to see it if they're interested over the next 10 days. And I think that it'll be up to them to make their judgments. But my judgment is that what I observe is fairness, procedural fairness being played out in a very careful way. The clip that you've mentioned of the former Premier being examined in private was meant to, I think, focus us on the issue that one of the issues in this investigation, and that is, did she have reasonable cause or reasonable grounds to suspect that Maguire was involved in corrupt conduct? It's not did she know, it's whether she had reasonable grounds to suspect. And I think that snippet would highlight for people watching and isolate that as the issue to be followed. But I agree with you, we shouldn't rush to judgment. You can get certain impressions from seeing that, but it's important, I think, to remember that ICAC has made no findings against the former Premier. It's merely investigating at this stage, and it will give her the opportunity to explain that snippet and to explain all the evidence that, on one view of it, might point the finger at her.
One of the suggestions is that ICAC can bring people down without finding guilt, but this isn't so much about like a court of law, finding someone guilty of a crime, is it? This is about a potential or alleged breach of public trust. Exactly.
It's not about crime at all. Although it looks like a courtroom, the way we see it here, it isn't really a courtroom. Certain court procedures are followed. Witnesses are sworn. They sit in a chair. There's a sort of a person there who looks a bit like a judge, although not dressed like one. And we have a counsel, and there are other counsel who'll cross-examine. So it misleads us perhaps into thinking that we're watching a courtroom, but it's not. It's an investigation, but this aspect of it's being done in public. And the value of that is that we can see what is happening. And as a community, we should see what's happening. What's at issue here is an assertion of a breach of public trust, an assertion of a conflict of interest that should not have occurred. That's it at its highest, and that falls within the definition of corrupt conduct. It's not per se a crime, and we are entitled to demand the highest standards of our politicians, and particularly the politicians who stand at the very top of the tree. So whilst Gladys Berejiklian is very popular, we must never allow popularity to trump integrity. So it's important that we have a body like this, and I think as long as it provides fairness, then I think it really refutes these assertions that it brings down people unfairly. It doesn't do that at all.
Anthony Whealy QC, former Assistant Commissioner in ICAC, thank you. Appreciate your time. We'll talk to you soon and as this unfolds in
as
ICAC
always,
over
Kieran.
coming weeks.
Yeah.